Coming to you from a portable microphone, this is Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Yes, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for continuing to listen to these conversations. And as long as you're listening, I will continue to have them and record them and share them on the internet with my listeners. Thank you so much for being a listener. Today it's with Adil Hussain. And so Adil, I'm pretty sure, is a podcast listener as yourself and is in town today visiting to look at portfolios at a portfolio review. And he said, it drives him crazy sometimes when he's driving the car listening to the podcast. And he really wants to answer some questions. Yeah. So we're going to give him the chance to answer some questions. And like I told him before we started rolling, look, if this isn't good, we don't have to use it. There's no pressure. There's no pressure, Adil. Adil is a very thoughtful, intelligent, self-critical writer and art. He's the kind of writer that in my mind is an artist on top of being an advertising writer. So I think he approaches language as a medium, an artistic medium. His graduation speech is that of epic lore. Now it's kind of gone into sort of the canon of creative circus folklore. He graduated from the creative circus relatively recently for a podcast guest. It's been about a little over a year. He went to Berkeley in Kansas City, and he's recently moved, very, very recently moved from his experience at Berkeley to Erwin Penland, which is in Greenville, South Carolina. I think it's pronounced Greenville, South Carolina, although I'm not sure. It could be Greenville. I don't know. The signs say there are signs in Atlanta for Greenville, South Carolina, so we can't be that far. The GPS in my car says turn onto I-285 to Greenville, South C. I think it's funny that it knows that the S is for South, but doesn't know what the C stands for. Anyway, I digress for a living. Adil, if you want to check out his work, is at adilwritescopy.com is his URL. And before we start, make sure you like the Facebook page at facebook.com/DGMS podcast. Adil, welcome back to school. What's it feel like to walk back in the building?
It feels, and first off, I just want to thank you so much, Dan. It really is an honor to be here. It feels just so surreal being here. I was saying it feels like I walked into my childhood home and there's another family living in it. I'm like, what's going on?
Have you ever done that? Like literally what happened? I did that one time. It's the weirdest feeling in the world.
I walked into
upsetting.
I walked in and it was empty and it was upsetting. I can't imagine what it's like just seeing, hey, what's that other student doing hanging out in my spot? That's my chair. My concept there. Move.
I had a childhood home that I went back and visited when I moved back to Atlanta, and I think I took my daughter there to see it. And I went into I was there from the time I was about 3 years old, and there was this really weird spotted tile on the wall in the bathtub. And there was this one that looked like a profile of an old lady with a bun on her head sitting on a rocking chair. And I remember that from my one of those childhood memories that's in your mind from the time you're a baby. And I went to see if it was still there, and it was still there. It's like, oh my God, that thing is still there. It's like the weirdest. And this was so 30 weird. Years later or something so bizarre.
It's freaky just even driving by on the streets, but to go into the halls in each room is just so bizarre.
Yeah. So welcome back, and
thank you.
So how are things going at the new place? First off, how's the adjustment been? Already switching jobs, and does the culture feel different? And how have you adjusted to the new clients, the new partnerships, new boss, new city?
Yeah, it's going well. I mean, the new city is. A lot of people don't know Kansas City is just awesome. It's a gem. There's a lot to do out there. You hear Kansas and you think it's just a bunch of cornfields. So Greenville's a lot smaller. We're still, me and my wife are new to Greenville, but Erwin Penland is great. The people are awesome. I love my bosses. I'm just starting to get assignments, so things are going well there.
Cool. That's good. Yeah. So when you thought about questions that are asked on this podcast, and you had some thoughts, so share first of all some questions that you really wanted to answer, and then I've got some questions for you about just the experience of, first of all, before we get to that.
Okay.
Before we get to that, let's talk about what you did, because you came in here. You're not the student that comes straight out of college into ad school. So what had you done? Because you, unfortunately. Why unfortunately?
So I just I think about the creative circus now. It just completely transformed my life. How it was I say it's the best thing to happen to me professionally. This is the career I was meant to be in. And knowing that, I regret that I had that sort of hiatus. I've heard that it'll pay off in the long run, But I think, oh man, why couldn't I have just had
So
it?
what was the
5 years
hiatus?
sooner?
So what was your undergrad?
So I graduated from Emory in 2008. I had a degree in creative writing. And then I thought I'd take a year or two off, maybe get an MFA in writing or a PhD in English, or think about what my next step was. That 2-year hiatus became a 5-year hiatus.
Right.
I just started off, I was working at a pizza restaurant and I was going to EMT school.
EMT school.
Yeah, and then halfway through that, I got a job teaching preschool to children with autism. And so I just ended up doing both. And I loved teaching so much. I loved being an EMT that's how that 2-year hiatus became a 5-year thing.
Blood doesn't freak you out?
Blood? No.
Interesting. Wow,
Yeah.
that's weird. So I have to imagine that like that sort of informs a little bit of a work ethic or perspective, or maybe motivates some sort of conceptual things in your mind, right? Was there not a... Because you kind of feel resigned to like that you've screwed up somehow, but isn't there a benefit to the experiences that you had before you came to ad school?
I think there will be, and I think there are. But I guess I sometimes question, is that just inherent in me? Would I still have those things even if I didn't have that experience?
Right.
Would I always want to, make work that makes a difference, has that more humanitarian or heartfelt bent to it?
I don't know. Okay. So I just find it fascinating that people that find this career later, I mean, it's not like you're older, you're not an old guy, but like you were one of the older students. And I just, to me, and I guess I'm saying this for listeners who might feel like, oh, I'm too old in my late 20s or 30 years old to start this career. I feel like they're the best. They're the best students. They're the quickest to understand the sort of the nuance and the power of the artistic component of language, which is what we talked about. I mentioned first in the intro. The fact that it's a job and a profession, and that this is something you get up and you work at every day rather than waiting for the teacher to approve your idea or like what you did or do it for a grade. So I think that I obviously didn't know you at 21, when you were 21, but the person that I met when you got here was a very determined, mature, talented writer. So I don't know how much of that was from your life experience or not, but
sure. Maybe you have a point. Like when I was teaching, it was very high energy, and it was very like you could not be off. Like you had to make 15 or some odd positive contacts with different children every 5 minutes. It was highly structured, and so maybe my approach to work right now is a little bit more structured, a little bit more disciplined. Right. Is the right word?
It's interesting because I feel like as a teacher, I wonder how much I'm supposed to be training students to practice those sort of structures in order to train them, because I think that students are still waiting for that sort of check mark or that approval. Or I've actually heard students refer to a teacher as approving the work, like that this is the one you approved. It's like, I'm not really approved. I mean, you're the one making it.
Yeah.
So I kind of struggle with like, should I force them to do X number, like 100 headlines every single time, because that trains you to do that? And I probably should be doing that. But I also know that doesn't work for everyone.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. You kind of have to figure out how your process works yourself.
Yeah.
But I do find it interesting that you said that like that experience probably did train you a little bit.
Right. And I just didn't realize it, or I'm not giving it the credit that I should.
All right. So what are some of these, because you have some really sloppy notes over there that I can't read without my glasses. But.
Sure. Well, I was listening to, I think it was 2 episodes ago, although by the time this airs, it'll be
way back.
I think it was Corinna.
Yeah, Corinna Felucci.
Yeah. You guys were talking about like what it means to be a creative, or what creativity is. And I remember just driving in the car, and I do this a lot. I listen to your show, and I just like sometimes pause it and just speak out loud. I've had more imagined conversations than you than I probably should admit, but
it's awesome.
And I realized, okay, so if there's 3 things. There's a creator, a craftsman, and a creative, and obviously they bleed into each other.
A creator,
a craftsman, and a creative. And if say you're a toddler and you're playing with Play-Doh and you just make balls or blobs, you're a creator. If you take those balls and then you make a cat, and it's just like an anatomically wonderful, beautiful cat, you're a craftsman. So a creator just creates anything. A craftsman does it really well. A creative makes something differently. You make someone feel something like it's unexpected. So if this toddler made like a toddler Bill of Rights, and the Second Amendment said, no mommy shall infringe upon a toddler's right to bare teeth. That's creative, right? It's different. Like you've never seen that before. And then I just started thinking like, I think the problem arises sometimes because our clients and maybe some people or some departments at an agency expect us to be more creators and craftsmen
Right.
when we just want to be creative.
Well, they're visualizing the cat the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, they give the assignment and they want you to make the thing that they're expecting to see.
Yeah.
And it takes a brave client, and correct me if I'm wrong, it takes a brave client to accept that, hold on a second, this Bill of Rights solves the same problem the cat did, but no one's ever seen it that way. That's why it's making you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way of saying it?
Oh, absolutely.
That's really interesting.
I think so. Yeah.
So is that you thought about that as a struggle, or you thought about that as just an observation? Because I think that's really interesting.
Right. No, at first it was just an observation because I heard the question and I thought about it. And then I thought about, my work and sometimes like where the differences are, where the miscommunications are. And then I realized, oh, they're expecting me to do something different,
Do we go through stages of being a creator to a creative? Wait, what did you say? A creator?
A craftsman and a creative.
Are those mutually exclusive things?
No, absolutely not. Like you can be a creative and also be really good at your craft, right? And then probably like if I was to draw a Venn diagram, like the creator is like the biggest thing. Like you could just, go to the urinal and you've created something. You're a creator.
Right.
So,
well, Karina came into the business from the art side too. I mean, I think that she sort of fell into advertising in a way. So I think that it makes sense for her to think of I don't remember what her answer was, but I think she's coming at it strictly from more the artistic expression side, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just weird. I think that when you do certain things differently, like that's obviously like what they teach at the circus, and what if you have that artistic temperament, you want to do things differently, like it just burns inside you, like you need to get it out. Yeah. But then how do you sell it to these people who are just like, well, I asked for a cat. That's
the art. It's the art of, well, I think it's a matter of playing back their problem. What they were wanting is not the solution. What they want is usually identified more closely to what the challenge or the problem was, and the solution should be more open-ended. So it's like, okay, do we understand your challenge and your problem clearly? Yes. Okay, so this solves that. Even though this isn't what you thought you were going to see, this solves that problem for these reasons. I think that's the only way you can sell work. Right. It has to be empathetic to your true target audience is your client.
Sure. Yeah. But sometimes, and I feel like clients don't understand their own target audience, or they realize that their target audience isn't them.
They're really good at understanding their product.
Yeah.
They're really valuable to understand what they make. They're not always aware or willing to admit the truth about how people perceive it or what people think of it. But that's part of this business. That's one of the bigger challenges, and one of the biggest challenges I think I had getting out of school.
Right.
Is like, why don't you like this? Like, this is perfect. It's like, it wasn't really what they were thinking.
Sure.
Anyway.
I'm probably going through a little bit of that now.
Probably.
Yeah. And the idea of just being, like, doing something different, like, it makes people uncomfortable, but that's where growth is. That's where greatness is.
Yeah.
And it's probably hard if you're, in the workplace, because you don't want to make people uncomfortable in the workplace, even though you need it for creativity.
That's what they're paying for. I've heard the opposite story. I've heard of I've heard of clients firing agencies because they gave them what they wanted.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were not. If you could keep giving us what we know we want, what are we paying you for? We could do that.
Right.
Anyway, what else?
It's probably just as a side note, like it's probably also hard too, I think, for leadership, because they have to be uncomfortable a little bit to be disarming.
Yep.
But you don't want to be too uncomfortable because you don't want to be too vulnerable in front of people. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. True.
Yeah. It's something that I've just been thinking about. The other thing, and this is just something like I've heard a lot about, and maybe this is a problem for a craftsman. If you are in advertising, you put in a lot of hours, you make a ridiculous amount of comps and edits, and because it's never good enough. Mm-hmm. And then I've always just wondered, like, if you're the type of person that you have the germs of ambition inside you, and you're always pushing, you're always like, oh, I want to work at such and such an agency or on such and such a client and, win such and such an award, then like, are you the type of person that when you get there, you know how to park the car and enjoy the view? Or do you just have that like, no, not at all?
No.
Yeah.
In fact, the last episode we were talking about that, and Zach Canfield had told a story about Rich Silverstein at an award show where he had to get up and speak to the audience about this award that they had won. He said something about like, I can't even remember the exact answer. But he was like, he just did not care at all.
Yeah.
Because having won an award means nothing about how we're going to solve the next problem that we have.
Yeah.
And, there's two different things that happen. One is you reach your goal and you're depressed because it doesn't feel as good as it's supposed to feel. You're like, well, I thought this was going to be way cooler when I got here. Or you're so focused, you got there because you were successful by focusing on the problem in real time.
Yeah.
And you get there and you realize that now we've got a new problem with a new client or new challenge to attack. And I kind of wish I'd had that more when I was younger, about living in the moment and looking at everything that came across my desk as an opportunity.
Right.
And not thinking about like what it's going to be or what the last thing should have been. But like, okay, here's this thing we've got right now. Let's figure out a way to make this really awesome.
Yeah.
And if it is awesome, great. If it's not awesome, it doesn't matter either way. We're moving to the next thing.
Sure.
That's not easy to do when you're younger either, because you think that the best idea should always win, and you think that it's going to feel great when you sell something great. And it's like, well, that's kind of your job, first of all.
Right.
It's like, been watching a lot of soccer recently, and it's like, these guys' job is to score goals. It's not a magical thing that like, oh my God, he's so good, he scored a goal. Yeah, that's what he does every day, and he should be. He's paid to do that.
Exactly.
And he's paid to do it next week.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess if you're on the outside looking in, you see this person score a goal or hoisting a trophy, the finish line from the outside in, it doesn't like, it looks amazing, but when you're actually there, it doesn't feel like you thought it would.
It's fulfilling to win a trophy.
Sure. It's fulfilling, but then there's also the feeling of maybe it's like you've trained your brain to just be in that training mentality of what's next.
Right, exactly.
Which I guess is to say that's why you have to love the process more than the final product.
I think that's exactly right. It's a great point. Great point.
Yeah.
Do you have another question?
Well, I mean, I was just thinking a little bit about diversity in advertising.
Okay. Yeah, we had a whole conversation about that recently.
Really?
Here at school. So go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, just that I don't have a solution. It's obviously it's a very tricky problem, both from a recruiting standpoint and a retention standpoint and a networking standpoint, which is probably circles back to recruiting. So
you're talking about diversity in the workplace.
Yes.
Yep.
Diversity. So I'm
let's get this straight. Let's talk about diversity in terms of diversity of thought. Let's talk about it as terms of, by bringing in a quote unquote diverse creative department, which Lisa, my wife, is very active in this, is kind of the last department in an agency that has shown any diversity. You've got diversity in HR, you've got diversity in account planning and media. You don't really have diversity a lot in creative departments, which are still typically pretty white and male.
Yeah.
And what you're getting there now is a pretty homogenous pool of ideas and a lack of diversity of thought, of a life experience, of cultural input, of kids who have been young people who've been EMTs or kindergarten teachers or lived in different cultural environments. And let me tell you something, there are show judges who won't participate on panels unless there's a commitment to diversity on those show panels. There are clients that won't hire agencies that don't have a commitment to diversity. So this is not going away. This is something that is a business opportunity for agencies. And what's your take on it? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts were just that, and maybe it's just the cynical side of me saying, well, change will finally be made when it starts hurting people's wallets.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to hurt when you lose a new business pitch because the client didn't see the diversity that their board requires.
Yeah, yeah. No, and it's a tough thing. So I'm like a Pakistani brown Muslim dude, and I grew up in the South, and so I'm used to being the minority. I'm used to standing out. But being in advertising, I feel it. I feel not meaning to. I feel well,
maybe, son, you shouldn't move back to the South.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
but no, I look around and I say, the agencies I've worked at, they're smaller agencies, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm the only brown Pakistani Muslim dude to work here, and then I think, well, maybe am I the only one to have ever worked at this agency? And then I say, okay, well, Adil, to be fair, I don't really think that there's a long list of brown applicants necessarily that they're getting. Mm-hmm. Maybe,
Well, that's the school issue too.
Yeah.
Right.
Like people don't know, they're not aware that this is a career. But then so like when you do get a person of color in an advertising agency or in the creative department, it's hard because they have these different perspectives, and I think agencies are really good saying, oh, we want different people, we want ethnic diversity, we want a diversity of thought, but we don't always take care of those or nourish those people. And then I
equate it to the same. It's a symptom of the same issue where a very talented creative becomes a group head or a creative director. They're good at what they do, but they're not trained to manage.
Yeah.
And you're talking about companies that aren't trained to learn to retain a diverse talent pool. So this is something that I feel like I'm just learning about.
Yeah.
In a sort of less superficial way, and becoming much more aware of how, as a school, we need to recruit more because, frankly, the school needs to take a leadership position, and you will see us taking a bigger leadership position. We have a lot of minority scholarships. We place very successful people of color, women, LGBT, blah blah blah. The list, and I hate even listing it because it's not a list. This is a pool, right?
Sure.
This is
people.
It is a human being we're talking about, but we're not going to survive if we're not producing the people that agencies need because clients are starting to demand it. Sure. And it's the retention is something that no one talks about and is absolutely 100% critical.
Yeah. And I mean,
because it's a symptom of people checking boxes rather than really actually understanding what you've got.
Exactly. I mean, it's just just doing things the way that they've been done. Mm-hmm. Like I'm guilty of it. You get a bevy of just a lot of portfolios, and so you say, oh, there's a ton of portfolios. So you just go to the person you go, oh, who's good? Mm-hmm. And you go to your network, you go to your Rolodex of people that and guess what? It's going to be full of people who look like you, think like you, went to the same college that you do. And unfortunately, like, the country's still pretty segregated. You have to go that extra step. You have to do a little bit more and,
That's a good point.
and do things differently. So,
right. For the listeners, a Rolodex is sort of like the contacts app in your phone.
Yeah.
But it's made of paper and plastic.
Yeah.
Okay. That's I can't articulate that. I don't know what you're supposed to do if you're listening to this and you are a minority. I do kind of think I know what to tell the white men, and that is that this is a conversation that you can have. This is an awareness that you can have empathy for, and you can, when it comes to men in meetings and there's one woman, to be aware of how that feels differently to her and not to interrupt her, talk over her, mansplain things. And, there's Lisa, my wife, made the point of white men sort of feel like they either like, you guys handle it, this is your thing, and I'm cool with it, whatever you guys say, but like, you guys handle it. Or they feel a sense of guilt because they're the problem but don't know the solution for it. And then they start to feel like the worst of them are starting to feel victimized, and then if I support them, then I'm losing my status, which is just terrible, which is why I'm not going to go anywhere with that right now. But this is not a conversation just for brown Pakistanis, Muslims to be having, or African Americans, or transgender, or anyone. This is a conversation for us all to be having.
It's a tough conversation to be having, but I think like the more we have it and the deeper we go into it, like, we'll all benefit from it.
Absolutely.
And to any minorities who might be listening, it's just, and it's going to sound trite, but it's like that. What we can say is keep it up, keep fighting the good fight. Forge a path, and like, you are valued.
Those are the exact words I was going to say. Highly valued.
Yeah. So, and
you're highly valued not because of the color of your skin, but because you have whatever the equivalent of being an EMT and a kindergarten teacher for autistic students. You have a point of view on the world that other people don't have that is valuable in a creative department. And you're more valuable to me. Adil would be more valuable. You'd be more valuable to me because of your EMT in kindergarten than because of your ethnic heritage.
Yeah.
But someone else's ethnic heritage is equal. You know what I'm saying? It's
I
just
do,
as valuable.
I do.
All
Yeah,
right. I don't know if they're listening. I don't know if the listener understood that, but I hope so. Okay, that's a great point. Great one. And I need to, frankly, I feel like I need to educate myself enough to have these conversations with more clarity. Mm-hmm. That was all you had?
That's all I have. That's all I have on my little paper.
So what are you excited about now? The new job?
Oh, I'm excited. New opportunities. New people. Cool. It's just good to keep things fresh. Yeah. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. Yeah. Like I thought I was going to be.
What's your weapon? Why do you think that? What is it about you that you think got you hired at Erwin Penland? What did they see in you that they wanted? What do you think your strength is as a creative?
I think it's good to be different. Like I've always be different, and not so much even different. It's kind of like I've always been able to be comfortable anywhere, even though I don't fit in. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Yeah, as a Jew in the South at a Christian school, growing up in a Christian school, I pretty much know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. So exactly, I would be all my fellow South Asian friends would be pre-med. And I never wanted anything to do with that. Mm-hmm. It's
even though you don't mind blood, that's interesting. Yeah. That would be the deal breaker for me. I get lightheaded.
That's funny. No, but just like I would play football with my brother and his friends, and then I would go home and watch CNN instead of college football. It's just like just having like
you're just a nerd.
A bunch of
Just a nerd.
That's true too. I am a nerd, but no, just I think having like a different perspectives, different like just having like broad circles.
Does that show up in your portfolio, you think? That people can read that from you? I mean, like, that's what you feel like your value is, but like, what do you think it was that helped you get a job?
I mean, I feel like so I know like people who graduated in the quarter with me, mm-hmm. Like they put in a good word for me. And so like that started that conversation. And I feel like it does show up in my work.
Yeah, I think so too. There's a thoughtfulness to it.
Yeah.
Listeners, you can check all that out at adilwritescopy.com. And make sure you like the Facebook page. Adil, thanks for doing this, man.
Oh, thank you.
Short and sweet.
Dan, honestly, it's just such an honor.
Easy, right?
Yeah.
Not hard?
No, not
just like driving your car. Just like hitting pause.
Exactly. Just like hitting pause.
Listeners, let me know what you think of these conversations, and send an email to Adil, too. It's AHUSSA2. AHUSSA2. I'm going to spell it again. AHUSSA number 2. Poop.
Yeah.
at gmail.com. That's the Google mail. You can reach me as always at danspodcast@mac.com. And I'll be back again in 2 weeks with another conversation. Adil, thanks again, man.
Oh, thank you, Dan.
Listeners, see you then. Bye.
Boom. That was awesome.
Wow.